Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this last Psychosocial Wednesday of 2025. This was our sixth season, so we're very happy to be here. I want, for the last time in 2025, thank the IAAP for having supported us. I want to thank Ludmila Ostman. Without her support, her energy, her love, this project would not be around anymore. Tonight, we have a dear colleague from Israel. Well, of course, if you're here, you know her, Robin Zeiger. And Robin is a supervising Jungian analyst and president of the Israel Sand-Play Therapist Association. She provides therapy, teaches, and leads workshops in Israel and internationally, and founded a new sand-play training program in Israel's periphery. She also teaches in a new sand-play course that is part of the National School of Psychotherapy in Jerusalem, and that trains Israeli, Arab, Palestinian, and Israeli Jewish therapists, and this is amazing. Recognized by Wiley for top downloaded journal paper on the Journal of Analytical Psychology, she has authored 15 professional articles and presented over 40 international talks. Tonight is the 41st. Her expertise includes dream work, spirituality, and the symbolic world. Her first book is The Making of a Jungian Analyst, and that's the reason why we are here tonight. Robin, the floor is yours.
Okay. In a couple of minutes, I'm going to share with you a PowerPoint so you can follow along with me. But I want to begin by saying this book and my talk is really about my journey to become an analyst in the second half of life. As a stranger in a strange land, I had immigrated to Israel 16 years ago. I did something many do not dare to do. I opened my dream life, my training analysis, and my heart and soul to give my readers a glimpse of the power of the soul. I did this with the encouragement of an important Jungian mentor and author himself, Henry Abramovitz, and I wrote this book in a month after my final case presentation to become an analyst, or perhaps the book wrote itself from the depths of my soul. I was too scared to publish it, and I sat with it for 6 years until Cambridge scholars asked me to submit a book proposal. Now, please join me as I share with you my journey. Okay, everyone can see, correct? Okay. Okay, so this is my book that as I called my baby. This is very important to me. Okay. And I want to take you with me with a way in active imagination. I want to ask you to close your eyes for just a moment and try to call up your earliest or most powerful dream image. And if any of you do not dream, come up with a powerful image for just a moment. Okay. Now, I'm about to show you my earliest dream image. This was dreamt when I was very young after I saw The Wizard of Oz. A large witch's cauldron is bubbling away in the middle of my living room. A witch is chasing me around the pot. My father is in the room and trying to help save me, although I have no idea if he succeeds. This poignant scene, dreamt over 50 years ago as a young child, is my earliest memory of a dream. The uninvited witch erupts from my unconscious, and I'm scared. I'm walking around the house very frightened that a witch is going to jump out. But I was also fascinated by, I think, a female heroine, something very unusual in my childhood in the 50s and 60s. Long before I knew what psychology was or Jungian analysis was, I became captivated and frightened by dreams that frequently visit me in the darkness of the night. I think this is where I began my personal journey, my path of individuation to become a Jungian analyst. So I want to take you on a journey with me. And often when I teach, I love to use The Wizard of Oz because it's a fascinating journey of individuation. And as Jungians, I think many of us are all aware of this. Okay, so now a small selection of my cast of characters some people are actually here with me tonight, and some people have chosen to, who are in my book, wanted their name used, and other people wanted a pseudonym. For my analyst, who stars in this book, I renamed her Neshama, which in Hebrew means soul, because often our analyst or our therapist is a stand-in for the inner story of our self or our soul. Also, a very important person in my journey was Tikva. You will hear more about her later. She's now 100 years old. She's a Holocaust survivor, was a student of Erich Neumann and in analysis with Yulia, and she brought me much hope in my training. Batya Roche Pelamoni, who is now our president, and she was my final supervisor. And you will see later on, but I call her the mother bear in the process. Yehoshua, who taught me about the power of pregnancy, and Tamar, as well as many other of my people who trained with me. I'm an only child, and I developed a group of siblings, and Tamar became my long lost sister inside. In addition, there are many animals and creatures you will meet. And as many of you may know, and those of you who don't, I'm going to talk a little bit as I go along about dreams. My book, besides teaching about the analysis, I also teach a little bit about the concepts, and the characters and dreams are all parts of ourself. This is a book, by the way, that I highly recommend for those of you who are interested in learning more about dreams. It's very simple, not too expensive, and easy to read. Okay, so my self or soul speaks through dreams and images. And this is the seeds of a Jungian psychology established by Carl Jung, who lived between 1875 and 1961. And he was very much a great hero. He traveled to places inside of the self that no one else had yet dared to go. This, which I talk about in my book, is he spoke about the two-sided soul that is capable of both reaching great heights and falling to the depths of despair. That our soul is very capable of creation and healing, yet at the same time, if we don't know about the destructive powers inside, if we don't know our own shadow, we are in big trouble. So this is very important. We'll talk a little bit about shadow as we go along. And this past summer, I was privileged and honored to be at the Jungian conference in Zurich, the first time I was there, which is where Jung is from. And I visited Bollingen, which is his sort of summer retreat home where he did a lot of introspection. He carved this stone. It was a very beautiful place. So I just wanted to share those pictures before we move on. And this is also a book that I highly recommend that was one of the last things written about Jung by Ariella Jaffe. They're really easy and nice and beautiful reflections. Okay, so now to my journey. This is the first dream that I brought to my analysis. Like most people who are therapists, I had been in therapy in graduate school, and I had even been in Jungian analysis in the past. I came to Israel, and I didn't feel the need for therapy or analysis at the time. But when I decided I wanted to train as an analyst, it's a requirement that you're in analysis before and during analysis. So I went back again because I was told to, and I had no idea how powerful the second half of life journey would become. I came to my first session with an Israeli analyst who said, she'll speak to me in Hebrew and I can speak to her in English. Little did she know how I struggled with this Hebrew, and eventually she started speaking to me in English. But I brought to her 16 dreams in that session, and we chose one. And she said to me that she used a word in Hebrew called shefa. She said there was a shefa to your dreams and to you. And I was sure it was a negative word, but it meant plenitude. So it's kind of interesting. But in my first dream, the fish had swollen up to two times her size, and I was worried and thought she was dying. And I'm putting her in another container, a shoebox. I thought the water was too hot. I didn't want her to die. There was a bathtub. And then at one point we are talking, and she wants a birthday cake. And I think after that she evaporated. but at one point she materialized into a person or a woman. So this dream spoke a lot about transformation and also, I think, about my fear of suddenly being judged again and being in a fishbowl. Our dreams hold images of our shadow. I love to take pictures. The picture on the left is something. I live in an agricultural village in the midst of nature in Israel, and I love to walk in the fields with my dog, and I sometimes take these pictures. But our shadow is the parts of ourselves that's hidden, that we often, it's sort of right near the top of the unconscious, and often our dreams bring things to consciousness from our shadow. Okay, so this dream occurred shortly after I began, and I'm in the back seat. There's no driver in the front seat. I think I willed myself to put a driver there, and at one point I drove into the water. By the third session, my honeymoon is over. I left all my important keys for real, this is not in my dream, to my car in my office in my therapist's office. And I have to laugh about it now. It's obvious that I wasn't quite sure who was going to be the driver in this journey. My dear friend, who's also a therapist, told me about how her husband once left his glasses in his therapist's office and took his therapist's glasses instead. Okay. One of the things that's very important is Jungians, we talk about so many different things in therapy and we invite so many different things. I often invite people to bring art. I'm a sand play therapist, so they work in the sand. Sometimes people bring a piece of music because we really come to it from all different sides, from that which is beyond and before words. And this was something I made at the beginning of my analysis as a picture of the complexity, how we unwind things little by little and try to sort through things. And to this day, I have this on my shelf and it's very important to me. Okay, shortly thereafter, I have a dream that I call the wounded tiger. And then I'm going somewhere with a small tiger and another person. The tiger ran ahead. I walk around the corner and I'm in deep water, but with no waves. It was as if I was sort of in the middle of an ocean. There was a concrete wall behind me, and I put my hand on it to ground myself. I was afraid the tiger had drowned, but I heard it crying, so I knew it wasn't dead. And then there were some people to the side that I was sure they were incompetent. This dream was very important because in the beginning, we were still strangers. At times, my analyst said this to me. We're still strangers. We were getting to know each other. And I wasn't sure who was competent and who was incompetence yet. So this dream was important. And this, by the way, this book I highly recommend. Is a very beautiful book by James Hillman and an artist about animals. And when we deal with our symbols and our dreams, it's often important to try to go and figure out also where they come from and what they might mean. And I found this chapter and I became fascinated with this tiger. Tiger was not something I dreamt about before. And one of the things I found fascinating, I had no idea that tigers could swim. And I learned it's again something that maybe came from the archetype, from the collective unconscious, the things we don't even know that we know. I also liked that the tiger carries our cultural shadow and the sinister side of it. So I needed this figure.
Mm-hmm.
And I needed it enough to begin to do sand play. I was very excited that Neshama also does sand play. It was not something I knew when I first began, but it allowed me to do sand play in front of someone because I've done it over the years, but hadn't really done my own process. And this is my tiger and surrounded by witches. And I began to sort of play with this. This became a shadow spirit that came with me for a long while. Now, again, Jungians love to talk about synchronicity, the things that happen that seem to be connected, but we have no idea how, what happened. I remember Tikva, as my supervisor who had worked with Erich Neumann, she would also often talk about how Neumann says that the world works on synchronicity, not on cause and effect. And this fits a lot with my Jewish roots of Kabbalah, of mysticism. So I like this very much. But what was very interesting is when I was writing my final sampling paper about a young boy, he had used a tiger, and I won't go into his process. I don't have permission to talk about it. But when I was writing the paper, I discovered that the exact week that I had this dream, that this tiger, that I had had a dream about a tiger, he had worked with this tiger. So this was very fascinating to me. And then my dreams, I noticed how much my dreams influenced my other dreams. In fact, when I was writing the book, sometimes I would write something and then I'd have a dream about the dream I had just written about. So towards the end of my process, this pet tiger who showed up a couple times negotiates where he wants to live. I don't need him anymore, apparently. So the child who's playing with it, I say, we can't keep it because it will be dangerous. So I thought of a zoo. The animal talks to me and doesn't like the idea of a zoo. So we decided maybe a safari in Israel would be good. And this seemed to satisfy the animal. Okay. Towards the end of July, my real fish, Devash, that this name I had given her, she actually showed up in our house via my daughter, and she dies. And I had been the one who somehow inherited her and was taking care of her. And so I become strangely sad about this goldfish. I'd had goldfish as a child, and my husband, who is always has a great sense of humor and brings a lot of humor to things, writes an obituary for this goldfish and sends it to our family. That he writes, we regret to inform you of the passing of this fish, sister of Bella and Lexi, our dogs. Arrived on Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, her soul departed on the holy Sabbath. She will be remembered for her golden consonants. The sound of protest was never heard from her, and she lived life fully according to the adage, people who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. She recently starred in several dreams and is said to figure prominently in several psychology papers. Little did she know she would be in a book. Similar to her living environment, plans for Shiva, the Jewish mourning period, are currently fluid. In lieu of sending flowers, please learn in her memory the portion of Genesis that deals with the story of creation, as well as the chapter of Jonah. Okay. Now comes a struggle for me in my analysis, a big struggle that was to go on for many years. I had been learning at Bar Ilan in a Jungian psychotherapy program before I became an analyst. That's how this all began. Due to Erel Shalit, and he was a very important person to me and unfortunately died young. And so my book is actually in memoriam of him. But we had a final ending of this year-long program, and my analyst was going to be there. She had mentioned it to me. And she just innocently walked over and was talking to me and put her hand on my arm. Well, this began years of longing for her hand. Nothing that she uses. She kept saying to me, you don't really want my hand. You want my symbolic hand. We went over this, and you're going to have to wait. You will hear a little bit more about this later on. But this innocent moment began a struggle of suffering for both of us. Okay, so now I begin. I have now begun the training for the secret apprenticeship. And I remember back to the fall. I grew up in Chicago, and I remember back to it is the fall in Israel, in a desert country. And I remember the leaves of my birthplace and jumping into the leaves and putting on sweaters and crackling fireplaces and all of these kinds of things. And it's a very nice feeling, but there's also all of the fears. I'm excited, but here I am in my 50s. I'm a stranger in a strange land in a group of 9 people. We began as 9 and ended as 6. I'm the one American, the religious Jew, the oldest person in my class, and the one with the broken Hebrew. I'm so scared I will be found out and thrown out as an imposter, and I'll make a fool of myself. So here I am, the wounded fish in that too small bowl that everyone can see through. And at this stage, I'm longing for Neshama's hand. I'm trying to convince her. She keeps telling me that this isn't what I want, and that that when we long for something, we can internalize it, but it goes nowhere. Okay, so we go on with the journey. And one of the things that's very powerful to me, and I think this is part of the reason I wanted to write this book, it isn't just about my journey, like I'm just anybody, but it's also because I'm learning. It's so powerful to me. And after being in the field for over 30 years as a clinical psychologist, working with many people, I'm suddenly learning about theory again from inside of myself. And it's much more powerful than when I learned in graduate school. I read The Child, but as Neumann has been very important to us in Israel because he was one of the first Jungians here. And he was brilliant, and unfortunately died at a young age. And so we read a lot, and I read The Child, and I become tearful. As I read about the primary relationship, my parents were very loving, and I'm an only child, but they were also very nervous. And I'm understanding in the words, it's like I see the words and I see myself, that I'm trying to capture the safety inside my own body via a hand. And that this is part of my solution to things. I created this. And then I began to understand, and this I understood much more towards the end of my training analysis, but I projected onto my own analyst a needed experience of the archetypal great mother, that we are looking for this in the world, and sometimes we project it onto someone, but I began to understand that it's a force from on high, that we use people and experiences to experience and eventually experience it within itself. So then I have okay. In November, I create a scene with the imprint of my two fingerprints almost touching. And Neshama says something in Hebrew to me about some famous art scene, but I don't really understand her so well. So I go home and describe it to my husband, Jonathan, and somehow he knows. And he shows me online the picture of Michelangelo and the Sistine Chapel, the creation of Adam. And it touches me greatly, so much so that we decide that we're going to Rome, and we went to Rome for a short time, and I got to see it. So it was very meaningful to me. I also now, I want to move, I'm sort of jumping, you're seeing snippets. Unfortunately, it may feel a little bit jumpy because I want you to read the book, so you'll get the whole story, but I'm telling you bits of it. But I'm telling you about a trauma of my childhood. I was never abused, thankfully, but there is a part of me that was always very, very sensitive as a child. And growing up in the 50s and 60s, I witnessed many children being hit and beaten. And in America, I saw stories on TV, I read things in books. And my parents maybe hit me a couple times. It was never good. I resolved never to hit our children, and we never did. And thankfully, we have four good children and four wonderful grandchildren. But this was something I dreamt about over and over. And I had been in therapy before, and I never could really get there until this time in analysis. And with this, it opened it up in such a way that I suffered a lot in the beginning. And this book by Donald Koshet, I highly recommend to people when I train. It's very good in terms of the trauma. Sometimes when we're subject to something too early in life, it's hard for us to deal with it. And we somewhat dissociated. I would see these things in my dreams, but I couldn't feel them until suddenly this analysis. But you'll have to read it to get more of this. Okay. So then I began to work with these things, and I'm going now into my shadow. And I'm struggling with the archetypal terror of masculine power. And we can talk about that a little bit more towards the end in terms of the war and all of these kinds of things. But sand play became this very powerful medium for me to create these things. So I create a scene. This is one of the examples with a bridge that represented my journey. And I placed in it a personal piece that I actually kept with Neshama. This was my personal piece of a sort of innocent and unsuspecting girl who sat in nature. So this is my girl. She has a little heart on her. And the rest of it is all from Neshama. This is an example of the kind of tray I created. And in this girl is looking at this sort of great movie. It's not a very good picture of that, unfortunately, but it's what we can do. And then I discovered a collection. It's interesting. I noticed this as a sand play therapist, but I also noticed that as having been in analysis, there's times I'll say to Neshama, I just saw this. Was it there before? And she'll say, yes, it's been there for a very long time. We sometimes only notice something when it's meant to be. So I found this red hooded man brandishing a weapon. I placed him on the other side of the bridge, and he's poised to wound or kill. He reminded me of my images of the hooded Ku Klux Klan, a part of horrific history. And when I would sometimes travel through back roads in America not so long ago, there were places where there were still remnants of the Ku Klux Klan. And unfortunately, I'm not so sure anything has changed so much in America. From there, I take you under the bridge. I had many dreams of bridges, bridges that were scary, unsafe, unpredictable, that I'm passing over, that something is falling off. And Neshama refers all the time to my strong bridge that I built above in my life and my functioning ego that she often reminds me of. Yet she suggests we must go under the bridge. So that begins to happen. I have a dream where I'm under the bridge and I see two men sitting there and they could not understand why I wanted to turn back. And again, they're incompetent. My husband would sometimes joke with me about all the incompetent men in my dreams. I think, sometimes this masculine force. So this is a picture I felt for this. But from here, I take you to the under the bridge and the real injustices in the world, because we work in analysis, we work in our inner world very much, but there's an outer world, and it's very important also to pay attention to both. So in my course, I'm learning with with Noah, who's an absolutely wonderful analyst, who's very, very politically involved and very left wing and she's a very caring person. And I'm learning about India and its mythology in Hebrew, which is not simple for me because the words are very hard, and about the outer reality of a caste system. And I'm troubled, and I'm giving Noah a hard time about this. Like, we're learning about this as if it's not existing, but it's really existing. And then at the same time, I face the horrors of our country. I came from America and I was not in an area where I was being threatened. I remember certainly 9/11, but there were so many times over my training that there were military operations, there were terrorist attacks, there was people on the streets with knives. I mean, all kinds of things would happen. And it was not so simple to get used to as an American. So in this case, three teenage boys have been kidnapped from a bus stop. It's clearly a terrorist attack, and no one knows if they're dead or alive. I take the bus to my office. I'm working in Jerusalem, and I see people handing out prayers to say, and I just want to cry. And unfortunately, they're eventually found dead. It was a terrorist attack. And shortly thereafter, in some sort of retaliation, a Palestinian teen is murdered by some of my own people, which is deeply troubling and sad to me. And my little by little, my colleagues in Israel are some of the most left-wing people I know, and many of them are very politically involved. And it's not just permeating me, but my family is permeated by this. My oldest daughter, Eliana, and her husband are very involved in various things like this. And they're involved in something called Tag Me'ir, which is a group that tries to combat racism and incitement and hate crimes in Israeli society. And they often, when something like this happens, they arrange something to try to to say we're sorry, or and they went to the home to pay a condolence call to this family of the Palestinian young man who was killed on a bus. It was the first time I ever did such a thing. I was in an area where there were people around who were clearly furious with us. And but the people who we went to in the house, and I was in the mourning tent of the men, I was in the women mourned separately. I met the mothers, and this was a one of many transformative experiences for me. So the inner and the outer keep touching each other, my dream life, the outer life, all of these things. I also have a sand play clinic I have at my home. So I created at home. This was I called War Horrors. I had made some paintings, and this is, if you can see in the background, this is Munch from the Scream. And that was, and I have my own tiger, in fact, but this was my, dealing with some of the horrors of war. And during this time, I have many dreams. I published an article about some of my transformations. It was the first time I spoke at the Analyst and Activism Conference. And in this dream, I see a way to pass under a house. There's lots of dirty water that's dark, and maybe a cave, and a man is carrying, I'm sure it's a girl. And I think to myself, this is not safe. There's snakes one cannot see. And the only other way through the house is above. I choose that path, and there's a mamad. A mamad is a safe room in Israel that some people have in their houses. Sometimes people go to external places or to big buildings. That's supposed to be safer against rockets. It's reinforced. During some of the things that happened, for example, during the Iran war, these places were not necessarily safe, but they certainly help. And unfortunately, not everybody has a place to go. But this was in my dream that my soul was trying to understand what to do. I was going from being an American to being an Israeli analyst and trying to make sense of this both internally and externally. Nothing simple. I'm still working on it. I wanted to bring you also to, many of you probably have had dreams of toilets. Toilets are very important places. They're places we expel things. They're places of our shadow. And I had many toilet dreams, as we, often do. This is also the shadow. And in my dream, there's something wrong. There's water's overflowing. Water comes bubbling up and hits me. It's gray and swirly. I'm grossed out. I scream, and someone throws me a piece of wet paper to clean myself. Now, again, one of the things we know as Jungians is that most symbols, most things like this have two sides. There's often a very shadowy side, but there's also, like, we sometimes find something very positive. Around this time, Neshama is reading a book in Hebrew, and it exists in English, and she tells me about it when we were talking about the dream, I believe. It's called In Praise of Shadows, and it's about a Japanese architect who talked about the shadows in Japanese houses. It's a short paperback book, and I found it in English, and I read it. And she speaks about what they say. I think she read it to me in Hebrew, and then I found it in English about toilets and the Japanese toilet, and the beauty of it, that there could be no better place to savor this pleasure than a Japanese toilet. We're surrounded by tranquil walls and finely grained wood. One looks out upon the skies and green leaves, and there's a dimness, a quiet so complete that you can hear things. And in the end, this passage says, here I suspect is where haiku poets over the ages have come by a great many of their ideas. So again, I am trying, and my soul is trying, and my process is weaving things together all the time. This is, I really like this passage very much. I was in Japan this year with my husband for the first time, and it was absolutely beautiful and meaningful in the bamboo forest, but I did not find this toilet. They were not quite as clean as this person describes. Okay, now I think here today I have with me some of my siblings. I know at least one or two were. And this is a dream that at the time was so frightening to me. Sometimes we wake up from dreams and it's as if we really think we're there. And it was a really frightening dream, and now it's amusing to me. But I was going down and down and down into the underworld with my siblings, a group of people. And we keep going through more layers as if we have to hide from something we have done. It seemed very bad. And then we were not sure what would happen. And I woke up, I felt like hell warmed over. My head hurts, my stomach felt crummy. And I had this image of wanting the things we sometimes like imagine our analyst, like as if she could take it away and make me feel safe. Kind of like a kid who wants to climb into bed with mom. And this dream was so powerful. I wrote about it in another paper, but I experienced so much being in a group of siblings in a way as an only child. And I had gotten myself into trouble. I brought a case to class one day, and the teacher gave me a hard time. And I was used to I came from a very rigorous graduate school. And so I was used to being given a hard time. And afterwards, my siblings were very upset. Like, weren't you upset? Why didn't you say something? We should. And they were, I think, going to defend me because of my Hebrew. And one thing led to another, and we got ourselves a bit into trouble. But what was interesting to me in this dream is I think I was secretly there was something very powerful for me about this because it was the first time I had siblings who not only were partners in crime, but went to bat for me. And as much as I felt bad that this happened, I also think it felt very powerful to me. So I had to share the importance of the siblings in my training. Okay, and this is a beautiful book for those who have not read it. Again, this was something that was introduced to me in my class with Bacha Brost and Yehoshua Ziv, and it's over the years I quoted very much, so I highly recommend it. But it deals again with this dream in the underworld. Okay, and again, now I want to talk for a few minutes about the importance of training supervisors. I want to tell you one story. My Tikva, who was the Holocaust survivor, who was very powerful to me and taught me a lot about dreams, she also taught me a lot about the shadow. And she tells a story one day to a large group of therapists. As a young adult, she was in the concentration camp and was given the job of making soup in the kitchen at night. And this was good because you get an extra portion of soup. A young woman, maybe a year older, was the SS guard watching her. And that was the night that there was a blitz of rocket fire from England. As the bombings began, the guard became anxious and says, "Come over here, miss." And she asked Tikva if she thought they would die. Tikva's shadow side takes over and she says, "Yes, I think we will die." And she admitted she was most afraid. She's giving this person a hard time, but she was most afraid she'd ask Tikva to hold her hand. But Tikva admitted to the audience, she was listening to this officer who was talking about how her boyfriend was fighting and all this, and she said that this SS officer was caught up in the same horrible story that Tikva was living through. As I listened, I was reminded of the saying, "There for the grace of God go I." And Tikva taught me much about the shadow and about being humble, and would give all of us a hard time if we were too inflated. I still hear her voice in my head with this. She finally retired last year at 99. I'm working alongst all of this. I'm very grateful. Our training was very multifaceted. We did movement therapy and art therapy at times. And Janice Shapiro, who is a very talented art therapist and Jungian analyst, did work with us. And I began to work on the sacrificial girl, like the inside, this martyrdom and all of this. And this was very powerful. I want to And now I'm jumping for a minute. I also had many, many dreams about babies. Now, during this time, I became a grandmother for the first time. I now have, thankfully, 4 grandchildren. And so there was real things going on, but all along I was dreaming about babies, and often these babies were speaking too early. They were eating things that they weren't ready to eat. Sometimes they were just stressed. At the very beginning of my analysis, one of the dreams I didn't share that I looked at later was of a baby that almost died, and I was helping to bring it back to life. So this was very important, these babies. And for here, I think he's with us tonight. I can't see anybody to know, but many years ago, I met Professor Christian Rosler, who is a Jungian analyst and studies dreams. He's written many articles on it. And he was looking for collections of dreams. And since I have so many hundreds of dreams, I offered them to him. And my dreams have been analyzed finally in the past year. And we sat and he kind of looks at the process that one goes through in analysis and the development of dream themes. It's very fascinating to me. And this is a little bit of a spoiler because the article that he's going to write about my dreams has not yet come out, but I want to tell you that there's much to come. And he's going to speak about the child archetype and use many of my dreams for as he talks about this. So I'm also waiting with bated breath for this. Now I want to tell you when I was in America, my dreams of the other was often of a Black person, an African American person. And often the other, when they're in a dream, it's some part of ourself that we're estranged from, that we're not close enough to. And it's projected onto the other person. So the other for me in Israel becomes the Palestinian, the Arab, sometimes the Russian. But little by little, I begin to befriend this person. And this was one of the dreams later in my process of a Palestinian young adult. It was based on a real story I read in the newspaper that I was very sad about. But we're getting to know each other. And I'm talking to him. And I somehow begin to identify with him. And so I'm beginning to see that I'm reaching across the border, both inside and outside. And I'll tell you more about the outside later. This, I tried so hard to make it work, and I can't. But sometimes I was so overwhelmed by all of the dreams and all of the material and all the things that came from inside of me that my husband again brought a piece of humor that I didn't know about. He finds the craziest things. There was an old radio show in America from 1935 to 1959 called Fibber, McGee, and Molly. And he would always go to the front closet looking for something, open the door, and on the radio, you'd hear everything fall out. This was a great image that my husband brought for sometimes the way analysis felt and my training felt. I was trying to show it to you because there was a very short clip on YouTube, and I'm sure you can find it, showing the actual closet. So I highly recommend you go there and find it. It's about 56 seconds, but I can't get it to work no matter how hard I try. Okay. Now, I want to bring you to the next piece of my story about the hand. It's 4 years later, and I sometimes write emails. I write an email to Neshama telling her that I feel this is making me crazy. This is no good. We're circling, etc. And this is in the background. Everything else is moving. This is not. And then a miracle happens. She's going on vacation. She usually doesn't walk me to the door, but she does. She walks me to the door, and then she takes my hand in hers, squeezes it, and smiles at me. And I melt inside. I've imagined this moment for years. And when she smiled at me, I knew it was okay because I gave her a lot of hard time. And she suffered with me. When we talk about falling into the dirty bathwaters, the Rosarium, we were in there together. There were many times where she wondered, did I need a different kind of analyst? But we knew we were doing good work. So this was deeply important. And of course, she leaves on vacation, and I do a piece of art of a hand emerging from the water. Reminds me of that hand a little bit now in Korea. And I have my mother's ring that I to this day wear. My mother is no longer alive. And there are three abstract pieces to tell a story of my hand in dialogue. The she that meets my mother's hand, Neshama's hand, and the hand of the Great Mother. And there was something, literally, it's like she kept saying, you don't need my hand. And I say, I needed her hand. And when I finally got it, everything calmed down. So something went inside of me. Okay, now we're towards the end. I want to tell you a little bit. I want to make sure we get to the end. I'm ready for my final, I've written. I'm thankfully I write fairly quickly, and I finally wrote this case. And I worked very hard with Batya, and she was a very good supervisor for me at the end. And at that point, I'm told that it has to wait even a little longer. We had a date, and then because it was written in English, not everybody was fluent on there were three people, and somebody had to take a little longer to read it. And I got very upset. And then I was told at the last minute I needed to speak in Hebrew, and I was very worried about this. There was nothing easy. So my friend, who's also a therapist, who unfortunately is retired because she suffers from MS, she tells me this story from an Ethiopian-born Jew who immigrated about an old man who's losing his eyesight. He goes to the doctor. He tried many treatments. He traveled to the hospital in the big city. No one could help. So he went back and he lived to learn to live with it. One day, he receives a phone call from the hospital and is told, come tomorrow. We've got a new treatment. So the man is silent and he asks, how do I get through the night? This was my feeling at the end. I was like, there was too much energy and too much feeling. But it happened. And then right before this, I have a dream. I'm not going to read this dream to you. I'll just tell it to you. But I have a dream with a cooperative bear. That's right. I have my final exam in November. This is in October. And I'm like, why am I dreaming about a bear? Again, it made no sense. I'm also having a conversation. I'm explaining something to the bear about string around his neck. And then it comes to me that at this point in my process, Batya has become my mother bear. She's really sticking up for me and making sure that everything's happening in the way that it needs to happen. Okay, and then I become an analyst and I write my book. Now, I want to tell you one thing I only noticed a few months ago, that this dream about the birthday cake, the goldfish that is the woman who's given a birthday cake, I became an analyst the week of my birthday. Um, I turned 60, and that was the week I became an analyst. And it's fascinating, the synchronicity, like how my dream psyche dreamed that birthday cake, and that's what I became an analyst. Okay. So I write the book within a month. It like wrote itself. And it's not like I want to write another book, and it's not so easy to get started. But Batya says to me, this is your final case. And I know that I did it my way. Okay. And this is a dream that I had that at this shortly thereafter, where Tamar, who's really the reason she's really my sibling, all my siblings, I'm very close to my training group, but we both had the same analyst and the same supervisor, and we only discovered it after we got to know each other. So it was like it was the same mom and dad, and we really developed a very close relationship. But somehow she takes a frog and frees it for me. And I was really puzzled, but it remains, I won't go into it now, but it makes me think now about the prince frog and the Grimm's tale and the development of a woman, that the woman needs to throw the frog against the wall to find a prince. So it's the shadow, it's the anger, it's the aggression. It all needs to be there. And at this point, it's better. Now, as I said, I sat on this for 6 years, and I wrote this article for Wiley, Dark Feet and Dark Wings, which was, for some reason, it was a lot of people read it. It was about climate change, and and I started getting all these crazy Will you send us a journal article here? Will you send us here? And Cambridge Scholar sends me, do you have a book for us? So I send a proposal, I put it together, and I was shocked because about a few weeks later, I got an acceptance and I didn't know what to do. But I realized it was coming to light after our horrific war, after what happened to us on October 7th, and ensuing war. And I want to say here that I bleed for every innocent child and adult who suffered and died on each side of the conflict. I still continue to bleed for them. And I knew I needed to talk about this, and you'll have to read the book it's a few pages, but I want to end with a dream because I began with a dream, I have to end with a dream. It's called The Baby Who Must Not Die. I give birth to a baby that was to die, although not clear when. I'm trying to nurse her, but there was only a little milk. I keep checking to see if she is alive. At one point, there's a specialist, a male, who's standing in front of me, and he thinks it's some sort of cancer. And if she lives, she will be a shell of a person. I'm trying to see if she could play and be happy. I'm fighting with him. I don't give up. And I push this guy, and he says to me that he could get his Palestinian colleague from the other side to consult with me, and I wanted this consult. Now, I dreamt this October 8th. I had a very frightening dream of being chased by terrorists. This was the end of the month. And I woke up in the middle of the night shaking, and I was sure it was a scary dream. And I wrote it down. I had the foresight to write it down. And in the morning, I looked at this dream and I understood it was, I've thankfully, with all of my parents being anxious and everything, somehow they gifted me optimism. The cup is always half full. And suddenly this dream brought me back my optimism because we were all walking around in such chaos and confusion and fright right after October 7th. So I held on to this dream. It was very, very important to me. And then I'm preparing this talk this week, and I'm teaching, as Stefano mentioned, at the Binational School of Psychotherapy, a sand play course with a couple other colleagues. And we have with us, there's about 18, 19 therapists who are our therapists, psychologists, various people. There's Israeli Arabs, there's Israeli Jews, and there's two women who are Palestinians who are in the West Bank and are not able to come into Israel right now when they could have in the past because of everything that's been going on, which makes me deeply sad. So they're with us via Zoom, and we do our best to build connection and talk. And I realize that Marianne, who I think is here tonight, maybe she'll ask a question or introduce herself. She is my Palestinian doctor from the other side. She really is a doctor. And I had imagined this Palestinian doctor to be a male in spite of all my feminism and all the women in my dreams. And this was my female. And this is the hope of the little things that we can do to build bridges and to try to connect with one another. And with this, I end by saying that my religion and I chose Jung not just because I was attracted to Jung, but because I'm a religious Jew. And there's something about Jung and his optimism and his path of individuation that's deeply important. And to me, I see the spark of godliness in the other. And I'm honored to be a therapist because I'm able to reach some of the most intimate moments we have sometimes are in the therapy room. So I want to thank you for listening to me. And I'm ending with how I began my book, a beautiful quote from Hellman that says, people come to therapy for blessing, not so much to fix what's broken as to get what's broken blessed. And thank you for joining me. And I wouldn't mind if you buy my book either on Amazon.com. They haven't yet ordered it. Enough people have to order it for them to order it. It's there, or on Cambridge. So thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you, Robin.
Get out of my screen. Okay.
Also, you can click on the link that we posted on the emails to advertise this event. Now is the moment. You're a fantastic speaker. I loved it. Fresh, although it's late. I mean, Here in Central Europe is 10 p.m. In Israel is 11 p.m. So thank you for staying with us. Now is the time of questions. So Robin is here for you. If you have any question, and Robin, congratulations, because to
Thank you.
publish.
And I'm putting on my reading glasses so I can see the
Good,
names on the screen. Okay.
good, good. Congratulations, because there are not so many analysts that publish their dreams, their analysis. So this is quite an interesting field. Who wants to break the ice? I mean, I need a very extroverted Israeli. I see her on the screen. So, I mean, actually, I see two, and I know they feel I'm calling on them. So, one of them should unmic the mic. One is blonde, the other is not. So, shall I call your names or you just want to go forward? Ah,
Let the
finally.
blonde begin.
The blonde is the other. You're not the blonde. Ah, yeah, you want the blonde to begin. I don't know. The blonde is. I mean, yes. Now,
Thank you, Robin, very much. I think you are very brave, very brave. You know that you remember that I was not sure about publishing the book. I had a question about being so open about your dream and your process. But I think it's amazing, amazing courage. And it teaches all of us so much about the process you are writing about. I'm so happy that you did it. And really, you're very brave, very.
Thank you, Batya, for being with me and encouraging me, and I really appreciate it. I remember you said to me, I think I would burn my dreams rather than publish them. And Henry said to me, "You're in good company with Jung and Freud, who published their dreams, but I have to remember not to become as Tikva would say, not to think of myself too much." But thank you.
So I joined that, and it's really brave. I'm one of the siblings that Robin is talking about, the one who made all the fuss to protect Robin from the attack by our teachers. And it was really a very unique experience. And I think you're really very brave to publish it, and it helps lots of candidates to see what's on the way and to see how we can look at the way from the end of the way. And in the Israeli context, Robin is really very sensitive and comes from the outside, and you see things that nobody else sees because of your special position. And I was witnessing the transformation from the American to the Israeli, and your participation in life here and the way you see the horrible things that are happening here in a very, very special way that opens to see the Palestinian suffering, which is not obvious at all for somebody who comes from the US and for somebody who is Israeli. So thank you for that and for bringing it here. And thank you, Stefano, for allowing this evening to happen.
Thank you. I also, you talk about candidates, and I do hope candidates can read it. But even before I began training, Murray Stein came to Israel. Henry brought him here to speak. And one of the things that impressed me is he talked about that there's not enough Jungian work out for the public. That, that this, and I think it's deeply, deeply important. It's so important for people on the streets. I write blogs for medium.com, and I often write about psychology. And this was my dream at the time. Before I knew what a psychologist was, I was going to be a writer. And in a way, finally, in my, second half now, I guess the third part of my life, I get to put these two things together. So it's also my dream that people who are just interested in learning about the soul and about dreams and about depth can read things like this.
And the additional thing or the important thing is also to be able to write in a way this is accessible and easy to be understood by lay people. Otherwise, we commit suicide. We can publish as much as we want, but will not go beyond the threshold of our niche. And so it's very, very important what you said, writing beyond the circles, not just in the usual journals, in newspapers, in posts, being interviewed. And we will put this on YouTube, so hopefully this will break another threshold and encourage more and more people to write in any way. This is what I always say, and this is why we published the book by Elana Lach on the power complex of Israel. That can really, we have the tools to speak to people and to try to understand what is going on. And your book is another example.
Yeah,
Is
I don't
another
have a
example.
lot of patience for jargon. When I go somewhere and I hear people, I was at some conference sitting with one of my colleagues, in fact, and this person kept quoting one thing after another and we both looked at each other. I thought I was off, and she said, "Do you understand what he's saying?" And I looked at her and I said, "No, I don't understand." And when I speak about, again, I go back to Maurice Stein for a moment, I teach a lot, and I love his simple books that you can buy online, and I can copy and paste some of his quotes because he's someone who speaks simply. Robert Bosnick's book on dreams, this is important. Like, we don't need our jargon. It just makes us feel good about ourselves, I think.
Yeah, I mean, those that write with difficult words perhaps have little to say, but those that have to say something just say it. We have Marjorie who raised their electronic hand. Please.
Thank you, Robin. I'm not sure about courage, but I'm getting ready to publish my dreams to help other twins.
Oh,
I'm
wow.
an identical twin, and I have had so many dreams since my twin's death about her and coming back and helping me and uh, letting me know that it's lovely on the other side. And so you're a real inspiration for me to go ahead and reveal all this because I think it does help other people to see how we grow and to give them hope. What do you think, my dear?
That touches me very much. My mother-in-law was an identical twin, and at one point she came to Israel, and her twins stayed in New York, and they had, each of them had a half of a necklace. And I think a lot about this. I mean, I found myself sometimes calling Aunt Joyce mom. It was like, but it's beautiful. Go for it. Absolutely go for it.
Thank you.
Robin, I think we are all touched by your presentation and your words, your courage. And maybe after a presentation like this, it's difficult to ask a question or make a comment. But before we say goodbye, I would like to thank you all. See many familiar faces that were with us throughout 2025. And Robin, perhaps you want to say something before we close this and say goodbye to 2025 together.
Um, I'm honored, as I said, to be here, and I hope to be in dialogue. People are free to write to me and share with me, and I feel blessed to be able to do this. You know, I really, really appreciate it.
And buy the book because it's a good book, and authors should be supported. Yeah. And Robin, thank you for being with us. Thank you, everyone. At some point we were 88. That is fantastic. You know. See you next year, which is actually in more or less a month. With Mary Stein, we will present again a book. There is a book by a new book series by Routledge. So I hope to see you next year. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy whatever. If you're religious or not, enjoy, and especially enjoy the solstice. May the darkness bring light. Good night, everyone.